the nation of Israel has very limited access to fresh, drinkable water. They rely on desalination plants which are built along the coast of the Mediterranean. Those desalination plants are operated by technology. They are operated with digital infrastructure. If hackers can incapacitate that system, and make no mistake, hackers have the ability to incapacitate that system if they get skilled enough, the nation of Israel does not have drinking water to give its citizens. On Team Proposition, we don't think it's right to tell Israel that they cannot use the force of their military to make sure that doesn't happen and to punish it when it does happen. And it's on that basis that we support the motion before the House today. First, model and definitions. Cyber attacks are actions taken by foreign bodies to harm another population using the internet in the digital world. Please make no mistake. Just because this happens in the invisible shadow world doesn't mean it's not happening, doesn't mean it's not dangerous. There are 4 forms of cyber attacks. First, state on state. This looks like China, the Chinese government infiltrating US government databases in 2016 to collect information on citizens. Secondly, state on private entity. This looks like North Korea attacking Sony's customer databases in 2014. 3, state-sponsored third-party attacks. This looks like Russian cyber attacks that most often come through the government's aiding and abetting of the private firm Tunnelbear. And fourthly, lone wolf onto state. This looks like American hackers DDoSing Chinese companies. What we would retaliate to is instances in which attacks infringe upon the sovereignty and or pose a tangible threat to the safety of the citizens of a country. We think this is the same thing as the calculus of military retaliation under the status quo. It's just adapted to the threats of the modern digitalized world. Okay, military retaliation often operates on a spectrum like other military actions. 3 likely effective measures that we would support taking, which range on a degree of severity. Firstly, electromagnetic pulses, or EMPs. This is when remotely detonated charges disarm all electronics within a given vicinity where the attack originated. Secondly, blockades. This looks like impeding military bases that the countries have by disrupting their movements. This looks like China blockading the US Okinawa base in Japan. Thirdly, disarming measures. This could be drone strikes or targeted bombing to destroy the computer infrastructure which was used to carry out the attack. Just like any other diplomatic crisis, on-the-ground intervention is a last resort. We leave it to individual states to run the cost-benefit analysis to decide if they want military retaliation, how severe they want the military retaliation to be. Please note, it is not Team Canada's burden to show you that military retaliation should be used in response to every single cyber attack. We just think it is one of the tools that is legitimate in addition to the other tools which states and bodies can use against cyber attacks. We have 3 points. Firstly, just war. Secondly, military precision. Thirdly, the demon yet to come. First on just war begins.
Do you think the US should have retaliated after Russia hacked its servers in the DNC?
Okay, we're not saying that in any given case, any given country should do X or Y. We just think that they should consider this mechanism in their cost-benefit analysis, right? So firstly, on just war. We believe a state is justified in using its military bank of resources if there's a threat posed to their safety and or their sovereignty. The reason for that is that a state needs to preserve itself as a state, needs to preserve the well-being and rights of its people. Why do most cyber attacks qualify as threats to sovereignty or safety? We tell you cyber attacking is a form of terrorism. It is used to incapacitate systems. It is notably used to cause fear and widespread panic amongst a group of people. The magnitude of harm varies between different types of attacks. On the low end of the spectrum, you have things like, and yes, this literally happens, like individual teenagers in China DDoSing individual computers in the US government. We don't think those are a very big deal in terms of magnitude of jeopardy they pose, and we don't think the US Army will choose to retaliate in a very serious way against those kinds of low threat things. On the higher end of the spectrum, you look like a few years ago, hackers gaining access to the Pentagon's Twitter account and tweeting that the president's life had been endangered. This not only caused massive psychological fear to the people of the United States, it caused the Dow Jones to plummet by several points. We think there is tangible harm. It is a great scale of harm. We think it's analogous, furthermore, to a type of military attack. And insofar as we support military retaliation to military attacks in the first place, we must support this. These attacks are often orchestrated by another state, and they're often an attack on the military itself. This often looks like hackers interfering with programmed flight plans, or interfering with air traffic control, or interfering with just radio transmission between branches of the military. We tell you, given that a cyber attack poses a huge threat, and there's rarely any other actor can successfully neutralize that threat, military retaliation is justified. Furthermore, many countries have a greater military capacity than they have a cyber capacity. Turkey is an example of that country. So just because Turkey's actual war chest is greater than their internet war chest, we don't think that means they should have to take an attack lying down. And Team Opposition has to tell us why there's no case in which they can support a military retaliation. Okay, second argument on military precision. Why will this be an effective solution? What are the exclusive benefits that necessitate making this something that we support, that we use? We believe that the military can use its relative might to implement a strategy of deter and incapacitate to deal with threats to their cybersecurity both before and after they happen. What does deterrence look like? Cyber attacks are less likely to happen in the first place because under the status quo, there's literally no countervailing incentive not to do a cyber attack. There is no body which regulates or enforces laws against cyber attacks. Consequently, given that there's a lot of potential for great gain out of cyber attacks, the cost-benefit analysis will always tell a motivated person to launch that cyber attack. So just by virtue of implementing some kind of countervailing incentive, we're necessarily better than the status quo. Why is the military the right countervailing incentive? We tell you it's literally the mightiest, most forceful, most potent looming presence in the mind of an attacker. We think this makes them more scared, less likely. This also changes the incentive structures of the states in which those hackers live. No, thank you. This looks like two things. Firstly, states like Russia, which actively work with, aid, and abet cyber terrorist groups, are forced to reconsider that, are forced to say, if we get caught hiring, aiding, and abetting a cyber terrorist group, that might cause war, right? And then they have to introduce that into their cost-benefit analysis. We think this finds them less likely to do it. But secondly, states are more likely to domestically crack down, change their internal domestic penal code. This looks like the USA triangulating the locations of where attacks are coming from to find them. This is important because it's very hard to triangulate location if you aren't in that country. So by actually getting those governments to do it, to police their own people, the USA can, for example, send the FBI to the building they determine an attack is coming out of and neutralize it before it happens. In the cases where they are still going to happen anyway, where it can't be preempted and can't be deterred, we think those instances are less likely, but yes, will still happen. We think that the military is effectively positioned in many cases to incapacitate that using the requisite equipment. Look at electromagnetic pulses, which we told you about in our model. We think those are extremely effective. Literally, you can't operate a technological device in an area which a remote country remotely detonates a signal towards. We think the military, and the military alone in most cases, has the technological capacity to enforce that kind of incapacitation, and alone has the capacity to deter to this extent, because it's effective, because it really is the only way to stop these violent and horrifying crimes we are proud to propose.
The first proposition speaker.
When side proposition uses military retaliation against cyber attacks, they are unable to know who provided that cyber attack and attack in a way that is completely uncommensurate with the cyber warfare. What is our stance on side opposition today? Firstly, we agree that cyber attacks are indeed regrettable, but we don't think it's the action of states to have military reaction in response to this. We think we would rather have improvement of cybersecurity, and we support nations helping each other across other borders. So for instance, if a country is technologically weak, we will help give them support. Fourthly, my first point will show you that it will be virtually impossible to attribute blame, but in their best case scenario, when we're actually able to attribute the blame to people, the best response is cyber attacks back and not retaliation. Before I move on to my point, why it's fundamentally, principally unjust to retaliate militarily, some responses. First argument, they say the military use is justified because it against the threat of sovereignty and an attack on your state. That's not true. An attack against your sovereignty and an attack against your state means that a response is justified, not necessarily a military retaliation. No, thank you. They simply told told you that we should use the military as the only form of this response. They never actually gave you explanation why. We're going to show you in my first point why military retaliation is firstly is unjust because of the misattribution, but secondly because it's uncommensurate. No, thank you. We think, we'll show you furthermore why you can't attribute, so this military intervention is unjust anyway because you don't know who to respond to, so you're not actually protecting your state's sovereignty at all. No, thank you. And they tell us examples of shutting down banks and infrastructure. No, thank you. We need to ask, are they really going to have an intervention with Russia, as they say, and invade Russia to the loss of some points on the Dow Jones and other things? We think that's a completely non-commensurate response and goes way too far, directly endangering the lives of people, whereas on our side, we're better at using cyber warfare. True. Secondly, they told you they need to use military might because you can't use cyber warfare against the state. I think give the example of Turkey. We say they have a simplistic understanding about the way these relationships work. Which countries are most likely to use cyber warfare, and which countries are the most advanced at it? The countries that are likely to use cyber warfare and are the best at it are those who are already highly developed and are already extremely strong. They themselves give examples of Russia and the United States. So we don't understand why they're saying Turkey, who has low cyber might and low military might, is able to intervene anyway, but we think with the help of international support, the cybersecurity is much more likely to help. So we don't think they're able to use their military might. No, thank you. They then tell you about deterrence. Under deterrence, they tell you two things. How it creates a disincentive for states to engage in cyber warfare, and how you're able to incapacitate the threat. Firstly, in terms of disincentives of state sponsorship. We don't think this is necessarily true. Because when a state engages in cyber warfare, it doesn't do it in the belief that it is going to get caught. We think it does it in the belief that it can hide it. That's why Russia has invested tens of billions of dollars in its cyber warfare department. We think what happens on your side is not that they're going to stop, no thank you, they're just going to push more money into it, make it more secure, and make it less ability to identify, which prevents the ability for you to retaliate or protect your servers. But no thank you. I want you to note that they told us that they're going to force these governments to intervene with people they don't have control over. They're going to intervene in Russia if Russia can't control independent attackers. No, thank you. We tell you Russia does not have the ability to control these independent actors because they're unable to locate them in the same way that the United States is unable to locate them. Because if they're working with Russia, then the government will simply hide it better. But if they're not working with Russia, no thank you, they'll simply be able to hide themselves because even the United States is unable to track them on their side. So we think it's unable to control their capacity, and they just make it unsafer when you're retaliating militarily to a country that had no control over its independent actors. But the second thing they told you is that you're able to incapacitate these networks. They told you three things here. How you have the EMP, how you can bomb cities, and how you have, lastly, ground intervention. Firstly, we tell you EMPs don't work because often geographic location is not indicative of where the cyber attack comes from. No, thank you. Most Russian hackers operate out from Hong Kong. No, thank you. Are you going to detonate an EMP in Hong Kong when the state actor is Russia? We think that's fundamentally unjust. No, thank you. And secondly, untargeted in its ability to do things. Secondly, they tell you bombing. Okay, so you're actually going to literally invade Russia at this point to bomb Moscow for cyber attacks. We think if your problem is protecting sovereignty and protecting the lives of your people, you're simply escalating tensions on your side and making it worse for everyone. So that deals with the ability to incapacitate. But before I move on to my argument, yes.
I could literally open up my iPhone right now and go onto a dozen websites which show an international map of where cyber attacks are going and coming from. Please explain to me how countries can determine with even more sophisticated technology where attacks are coming from.
Because the cyber attacks you're determining are, as you said, by 12-year-old Chinese kids launching these things. The cyber attacks you're not going to identify are those state sponsors where you've spent tens of millions of dollars in their departments. That's why, no thank you, even when the US suspects Russia's doing it, they're unable to confirm it because it's coming from Chinese proxy servers. You're unable to properly place the location of these attacks. My first argument, why it's principally unjustified, no thank you, for military retaliation. When is military retaliation justified? We think there's two ways it can be justified. Firstly, when there's direct attribution to the cause of your harm, and you can have good reason to believe that the person harming you is the person you're attacking. But secondly, when you're reacting proportionally. Firstly, about the direct attribution. I'm going to tell you why we can almost never attribute cyber attacks to a single actor. No thank you, whether it be state, private entity, or independent group. First reason, we think it's the nature of these most hacks is that it's anonymized. They're able to use scrambled ISPs and IP addresses to prevent the ability to be tracked. So maybe when you talk about the 12-year-old Chinese kid, it's actually the Russian hacker in Russia. No thank you. When you identify a cyber attack in England, it may actually be a person from Hong Kong. You're unable to trace it. But furthermore, they use things like the dark web, where you have proxies, servers, and bouncing off various servers, no thank you, where you're unable to actually trace it, especially if they want to talk about state-sponsored cyber attacks, where they literally spend millions of dollars to mask all of this. And we think it's shown empirically that even the United States has been unable to directly prove Russia's hacks or other hacks. No thank you. But secondly, even when you can trace it and track this boundary, you can't prove the source or intent of that cyber attack. As I said, most Russian hackers tend to operate out of Hong Kong, and we don't think geographic area, no thank you, necessarily shows the intent or source of that cyber attack. We think even if you're able to trace it back to its geographic location, you're unable to determine the party, whether it be state or private entity, that sanctioned that attack. So you're not able to directly attribute. No thank you. But we also think that you can't prove that it's a state-sponsored nature of an attack. We tell you that 100 people in a basement are able to inflict as much damage as states can if you have expert hackers. Just look at the power of hacktivist groups like Anonymous, for instance. When you have hacks from these type of groups and independent actors, you're unable to, no thank you, assign blame to a state, and you're unable to attack a centralized situation, and so you're unable to respond. No thank you. I think given these reasons, there's no way to prove that states did the cyber attacks. There's plausible deniability and high capacity for misattribution of blame. Why is this important? Because any form of military retaliation, no thank you, lays the grounds for escalation and war, and you need beyond reasonable level to do this. In any intervention, lives are lost on both sides. One reason we think the Iraqi war was so unjust because it was based on the false assumption of nuclear weapons. Their side legitimizes invasions or attacks against potentially innocent nations. It's unjustified. But secondly, why it's not proportional. Firstly, we told you why I think it's virtually impossible to hold the state to account, but even if by some miracle they can, it is still illegitimate. Military intervention is only commensurate when it's response to a direct security threat. We think the plethora of ways cyber attacks manifest means that this isn't true. Firstly, in terms of espionage, when they hack servers and take information. We don't think it's legitimate to actually intervene in a nation and cause direct loss of life only when you've lost information in terms of espionage. That's why in the Cold War, even if there was espionage, you didn't invade other nations. So we don't think it's justified there. But in their worst case scenario, what happens? Things where you shut down the banking system, where you take down economic rights, like they told you in ourselves. Even here, we think the direct threat to people's lives is incomparable with the threat you have when you have military intervention that is going to kill people and is most often almost definitely going to have collateral damage with civilian groups that had no part in the cyber warfare. So both because you can't actually blame and because it's not commensurate, both in terms of response and who it targets, the proposition must follow.
Thank you. Team Philippines wanted to have this debate purely on their best ground. The states where we don't have any idea who did it, where we don't know the location of the attacker, when it's a 12-year-old boy in China. Team Philippines needs to engage in the real world, where just because violence comes from behind a computer screen and not the ballot of a gun doesn't mean it can't destroy lives, doesn't mean that it can't result in the collapse of hospital infrastructure, doesn't mean that the entire New York Stock Exchange could be vulnerable to an attack. So in those cases where we do know the attacker, we think we should attack. But I'm even going to contend them on their ground where we might not know the attacker, why force is still justified. Team Philippines need to attend to the specter of what is happening in the world, the trend of cyber warfare and how we name it. That's going to be the subject of my argument, the demon yet to come. Extensive refutation. First, their stance says that they support international cooperation. I'm going to show you why that's impossible without military retaliation. That's my argument. Second, they said they're going to give technology to more vulnerable states to defend themselves, providing no analysis as to why the countries that have this technology would ever do that. Third, they support cyber attacks as a response. So if it's true that we don't know where they're coming from, if it's true that we have no information, the cyber attacks are arguably just as bad, just as principally illegitimate, especially, ladies and gentlemen, if they're conducted by militaries. Their first argument was why we don't know who did it, therefore we can never attack. First, we contend this on an empirical note. Often you are able to tell. First, empirically, because we see a lot in the news that we know where it's coming from. But why? How do we know? First of all, the most common attack against infrastructure is a DDoS, where you just overwhelm the other infrastructure with data until it collapses. These are not the kind of attacks that states do. The attacks that states do recognize that firewalls in other countries are immune to those. So they need to get specific encryption data. They need to get specific intelligence. Often there are people who conduct espionage on the inside of that country who provide that information. Meaning, when the United States finds out that literally the social security numbers of all government employees since the 1960s have been stolen, they know the only way that could have happened is if the actor that did that had access to very sensitive intelligence information that no non-state actor would, ladies and gentlemen. Now, even if you don't know, why is it still legitimate to retaliate? Because proportionality doesn't just extend to going after the exact people who committed it. Often, proportionality is still justified insofar as you respond with commensurate force, which is what my partner told you that military action is, in order to make sure that the states that do have jurisdiction over those people who are committing the cyber warfare are the ones who stop it, right? Now, they say, like, would you retaliate against the 12-year-old boy in China? Obviously not. That's not the premise for a war. But more importantly, they say, what if the state can't control the people within their borders? Then why on earth would you invade a state when that state you're invading can't control who's attacking within their country? It literally makes no sense to do that. They're missing the characterization here. But more fundamental, what does Team Philippines have to say about all the innocent people who lose their power? For example, how in Ukraine, entire power grids were deactivated by Russian attacks. So sure, you might not know exactly in what apartment complex that was committed, but what is Team Philippines going to do to respond to that scenario? Now, they didn't really have a second constructive argument, but basically what they said is that, like, look, there are people in basements like Anonymous that can do this, so how are you going to justify, like, how can you justify going in those situations? Again, it's not Anonymous that's hacking infrastructure, ladies and gentlemen, and we think it is just, even if you don't know the exact identities of those who committed them, to know that if an actor was able to prevent that attack from occurring, but let's say in the case of Russia, chose not to because they wanted the damage to be inflicted, that it is just to respond with a blockade on Russian ports of the North Sea to make sure that Russia cracks down on them because other lives are in the battle. No, rebuild. What are the first thing they say in response to our point about just and necessary war? The first thing they say is, all we've proven is that we need a response, not a military one. That is false, right? First of all, because we gave you the example of when some of these attacks are actually on the military itself, on the radar capability, on missile defenses, right? So if the military is under attack, presumably the military should be able to respond. But second of all, we told you how no other actor is able to do this. That's why the military has to do this. But third, literally, the Chinese government, through hacking into people's phones by getting firmware data that terrorist groups don't, can spy on every single citizen that owns an iPhone. What other body is potentially supposed to respond to this than the military, which can act in coordination with the government? They say highly developed, strong countries tend to have good cybersecurity. This is not true. Turkey had enough technology to shoot down a Russian plane, but doesn't have the kind of cybersecurity that they want to use in retaliation. In response to the second point, what they say is basically that since we can't triangulate it, how do we hope to respond? It's about creating a deterrent, ladies and gentlemen. But also, when they say that countries want to keep it secret, this is disingenuous. The USA advertised that it launched the Stuxnet virus against Iran. Russia confirmed that they used the Tunnel Bear infrastructure and continue to use it. And China continues to use its infrastructure even though we've outed them already. Yes?
Sir, it's just untrue that these states would say and claim that they committed these atrocities because they themselves deny it. But even if it's so, then now the states will continue denying it right now because they don't really be retaliated on.
Hey, the only way to make sure that they'll stop is if there is retaliation in the first place. That's why they're not retaliating currently. Now, I want to move on to my constructive argument on the demon yet to come. The premise of this argument is, we have to nip this in the bud now to avoid the terrifying world where cyber attacks are a regular occurrence and far more dangerous. We're talking when stock exchanges can be hacked on the regular, when the electronics that control oil supplies in the Strait of Hormuz are able to be shut down, and 40% of the world's oil supply can go into the ocean. Is this on the horizon? Yes, because this technology becomes more prevalent and tends to spread faster than armaments technology because it's not as expensive and only requires software. This is why more countries in the world are going to be able to get this in the future. So, why in order to prevent this can we only use military retaliation? Because we think it forces non-retaliation treaties. The only currently existing, or one of the only examples of this, is the one signed between the United States and China after their carbon treaty discussions. But that only happened on the political backdrop of cooperation between the nations. Meaning, if that didn't happen, that deal wouldn't have been signed. So why is this the only way to encourage diplomatic action on an international level? First, because it breaks the international tacit acceptance that cybercrime and cyber warfare is different than conventional warfare. Second, it means there's internal pressure from citizens who want to avoid war, which compels their government to sign treaties. When people don't know what another state can do with their social security information, they do know what the consequence of a war is and will put pressure. But third, countries with this technology want to prevent international cooperation. This changes when there's a threat to international security that powerful countries now have to attend to. We point point you to the fact of like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, where when we realize that there's mutually assured destruction, states have an incentive to cooperate. The problem with the status quo is the only existing legislation on an international level regulating against this is the Budapest Convention, signed in 2003, that's almost 15 years ago. Most of it only regulates cyber crime, not cyber warfare. But second, none of it is ever enforced by the UN Security Council. The only way to change that is to make cyber warfare a threat of international conventional warfare security. That is what encourages international bodies to act on it. Why is this the only solution to the problem? The only way you can stop this technology from being proliferated, the only way you can stop it from being developed further, the only way you can have international cooperation to hunt down cyber terrorists together is if it's done between nations. That is only accomplished when there's a legitimate threat that forces nations to contend with the reality of cyber warfare. Team Philippines can't have this debate just on their best day. They need to attend to the lives of millions that are at stake. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, in my speech, I'll be proving to you why their policy makes these states even more vulnerable to cyber attacks, which means that the only goal that they want to do is protect the state from cyber attacks. They get worse off under their side. But before that, a few things I want to be able to respond. First, the new argument coming from second proposition speaker is a contradiction to their case. Because he said that the only time we'll get political capital for us to feel the threat of cybersecurity and make it so that we'll have harm is we attach it with military conflict as well. If they said in first proposition speaker that cybersecurity and cyber attacks are so harmful to the state and it is like military intervention, then why do we need to attach military intervention as well? That means they're conceding that it's less harmful and the threat of cyber attacks aren't as great as military intervention. They have to choose on whether or not cyber attacks are so strong, which have been able to get the political capital either way, or they're saying that the military intervention is still greater than cyber attacks. But secondly, we think that a lot of times cyber attacks are done in closed doors, that there are countries that are not necessarily democratic. Public pressure, assuming you get more public pressure under their house, won't change the nature of cyber attacks, so we don't think they're able to reduce the cyber attacks under their house. But lastly, my argument will show you why military intervention makes cyber attacks more likely to take place, especially with rogue hackers. But before that, the next thing I'll respond to is our case. How did they respond to our case? Because we gave you twofold things. First, that it's impossible to attribute blame in terms of a state or a non-state actor when you commit a cyber attack, and secondly, even if you're able to do so, it's commensurate. First, on the attribution of blame. They're very flippant in saying, well, we can find out who these hackers are without really telling us who these hackers are. The literal analysis we heard from the second proposition speaker was, well, if there's extensive amounts of intelligence gathering and your files have been lost, then you probably know it's a state who hacked you. That doesn't prove which state hacked you. Was it China? Was it Russia? Was it North Korea? They haven't shown us why we're able to triangulate that data to prove the state was the one who's able to hack them. But secondly, they said, a lot of times these states declare and claim that they're the ones who committed the cyber attacks. First, they think it's just blatantly untrue. Russia themselves denied that they hacked the DNC servers already. But even if they do it in status quo, their calculus now will change. Knowing that they'll have military retaliation, they probably won't tell the world anymore that they're the ones committing these cyber attacks in the future, so they're not able to trace who the attribution of blame is. No thank you. What does this mean then? Given that they're not able to prove, and the states are not able to figure out who the people or who's the ones committing the cyber attacks, this is problematic for two reasons. First, we tell you it's unjust to attack states like Russia, for instance, without conclusive evidence that they're the ones launching the attacks. No thank you. We think this happened in Israel, for instance, when they accused Gaza of attacking them without any evidence. They bombed Gaza because of that. We think it's unjust to begin with. No thank you. But secondly, the effectivity of all their arguments relies on the premise that they're able to target who committed the cyber attack. The point of deterrence, for instance, only works insofar as the state is able to retaliate the right state actor. The point of incapacitation, where you're able to launch an EMP on the military infrastructure, only goes to show when you know who's the one hacking you. So unless they're able to prove how they're able to attribute blame or find out who commits these cyber attacks, they can't win this debate already. No thank you. But secondly, even if they're able to attribute blame, and this is where we have to clarify our stance, right? Because we didn't say we'll use cyber attacks altogether. We said that we'll use cyberattacks in instance which we think is impossible, where you're able to find blame, because they have to show to us why military retaliation is the only way. We told you no thank you, that the commensurability of using military retaliation is not commensurate to no thank you using cyber attacks. Why is this so? We said that there's a direct harm to the rights of lives of individuals when you attack them militarily. That's incomparable to even the worst case scenario where sometimes your pipelines will be destroyed, where your water and electricity might be taken away. As in the destruction of your economic rights versus your basic fundamental right to life. There's not commensurability there. So even if you're able to determine which state, no thank you, we think it's principally unjustified. But secondly, they haven't told us why military retaliation is still the best strategy to counter cyber attacks. We told you that if you want to take down these hackers, it's best to hack them back and prevent them from accessing internet servers. So assuming the worst case, best case scenario for them when you're able to find them out, they have to show us why these cyber attacks are not enough. Before I move on to my case, sure, go ahead.
Can you please tell us why the alternatives you're offering are mutually exclusive with military retaliation?
We think they're not mutually exclusive, but if we think that they're proving to be effective already, we don't have to use military intervention on your side. The fact that you yourselves concede it's part of a tool in a toolbox shows that it can be effective and can work. Let's move on then to my argument, how it makes the security of citizens of the states worse off. We think this works in two levels. The point at which you're able to use military retaliation, you escalate the theater of war from cyber warfare, no thank you, to other forms of warfare like physical warfare. We think that the states, if you bomb Russia as they want them to do under their allows, Russia will probably not sit down and surrender. They'll probably bomb you back and retaliate as well. That gives a greater threat to your citizens within the nation, because now they're not only harmed by cyber attacks, but they're also harmed by the possible physical threats of rockets, no thank you, hitting your own state. So we don't think that the sphere of physical war, it becomes far worse for these states to begin with. It harms their national security. But secondly, even if it's on the level of cyber warfare, we think it's very problematic under their attacks. We think that military intervention opens up greater hatred among the states who are able to retaliate. Recognize that there are two kinds of hackers here. One, state-sponsored hackers who they said are from Russia or funded by Russia. But secondly, rogue hackers who hate the state and try to destabilize them at all costs. There are people like Autonomous International, for instance, or even extremist hackers from Islamist extremist groups in the Middle East that have been trying to make DDoS attacks against the state. What does military intervention do? Recognize that no matter how precise the use of military intervention, you will create collateral damage. And missiles, no matter how strong or precise they are, would kill civilians and would be perceived to be unjust. We think that even if they're justified under their rule, a lot of the civilians within these regions where you're able to intervene, the people, no thank you, who lose their internet access or electricity, no thank you, because you bomb them with EMPs, are likely to perceive the strategy as unjust. Why is this important? Because even if we're able to prevent the state from being able to intervene and use cyber attacks, we now create a new host of possible actors who launch even more cyber attacks. Talk about increase the level of activism against that state and increase the number of rogue hackers who hack the state. Why is this more problematic? If we think that these people are incredibly angry towards these individuals, it's very likely for them to not be restricted in the ways that they hack. They're more likely to target even more civilians and cause even more terroristic means of cyber warfare. We think to increase that risk, the point at which you increase things like anti-Western sentiment within these states, the point at which you increase hatred towards these states because they feel like it's unjust for them to be bombed for the actions of a state that they never even consented to or they never knew about. What does this argument all prove? This proves that even if this debate is only about protecting ourselves from cyber attacks, military intervention and military retaliation makes you even more vulnerable. So all the harms that we're trying to talk about becomes far worse under our Senate House, and that's why it's problematic for us to allow states to do so. We've proven to you why it's unjust, but why it's counterproductive to fight cyber attacks. We're very proud of this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to clarify two things at the top of this speech. First of all, we don't need to support all of these worst-case scenarios that opposition is pushing onto us to defend. If every single person in this room can identify that war is complex and that invasion and boots on the ground shouldn't always be your first response to war, I think that states and their sophisticated military teams can also determine that. We're saying that in some cases, it is okay for states to choose other measures to respond to cyber attacks, whether it be cyber attacks or sanctions, whatever it may be. But in some cases, military response is the only response that is necessary. Second thing I want to clarify. Opposition needs to do more to engage with our best case scenario. Our second speaker pointed this out, and they haven't done enough of it. Because when we talk about states that don't have complex cybersecurity capacity, how are they supposed to defend themselves when someone hacks into their firewall or hacks into their cybersecurity systems? How about the cases where there's such a severe infrastructure, like harm on the infrastructure, that means that those states can only retaliate militarily, that targeting just a cyber attack back wouldn't do anything to incapacitate the other state? Let's get more engagement. That being said, I have two areas of clash. Firstly, the principle, and second of all, do we actually get a safer world? Firstly, in terms of the principle, opposition hangs their case essentially on the principle that if we're unable to determine where these attacks are coming from, we can't retaliate against that actor. We have to be clear about where that attack is coming from in order to respond. Firstly, teams' opposition's mechanism relies on them also knowing the source of those cyber attacks. Their mechanism is retaliating against cyber attacks with cyber attacks. That means that you must know where that source of the cyber attack came from in order to actually respond. So this is a concession that not only is it empirically possible to know the source of these attacks, but moreover, they're willing to sacrifice some of their principle if they will always respond in some way, even if they don't know where those attacks are coming from. Team opposition can't have their cake and eat it too. Either they will go with their principle to the core and leave states defenseless if it means that they don't know where the attack is coming from, or they will sacrifice some of their principle and respond regardless. But second of all, I challenge the premise of this argument, which is that you have to know explicitly, like, the exact source of where that attack is coming from in order to respond back. States in warfare don't just respond or attack the naval bases, for example, or the soldiers or the patches of soldiers that are firing arms or weapons at them. What they do is they try to obviously minimize civilian casualties, but they try to incapacitate the ability of an area or of an actor overall to present an even greater threat to that state. So note panel, moreover, that their response is to have very targeted cyber attacks back, versus our response is to have a lower threshold of harm, but one that affects a broader group of actors that are unable to respond back. So we just make it that people can't really use their electronic devices for a period of time, versus they respond by devastating the infrastructure systems of another country, which I'm not even sure is proportional or even fair. The next claim that we get on their side of the house is that lone wolf attacks could cause tremendous harm. So we're talking about the American teenager who hacks into Chinese servers, and this leads to Chinese retaliation against the United States. This is our worst case scenario. So first, Armin already told you that we can identify the type of attack, the sophistication of the attack, and the location of the attack. We heard no response back. But second of all, the key assumption on team opposition is that a country will be willing to retaliate on the basis of a lone wolf attack. When countries decide to use military retaliation, there are a lot of factors that go into that decision. You could completely mess up your foreign policy if you decide to, send off a drone or a strike into another nation. That means you're only going to be willing to use this as a measure if you know that it is really a devastating cyber attack on your country. So even if you don't know directly where it's coming from, if it is so devastating that it deserves a response, we say it's fine for countries to be able to protect themselves. But third, we are no response to the fact that we get fewer lone wolves attacks in the first place. When countries have an incentive to crack down on these sorts of attackers within their own state because they don't want the possibility of having to go to war, then we get fewer of these instances in the first place. So on their best case scenario for our grounds, I mitigate the likelihood of that scenario ever arising, but I tell you that even if it does come up, the need of a state to protect itself and its people is so great that it justifies it. Sure.
Can you give an example of an instance where there was conclusive 100% evidence beyond reasonable doubt that the state launched a cyber attack?
Thank you. We don't need to prove that there was 100% certainty in every single case, because your side also relies on that same proof, that same mechanism to have the cyber attack retaliation back. What we say is, empirically, there has been progress towards having more and more proof of where that attack is coming from. That means that we can directly target it at its source in the vast majority of cases. Let's look at the ability to actually protect states. The first major claim that we get here is, from the last speakers, we have a contradiction in our case, which is to say that we can't prove our international cooperation benefits because if it's such a great threat to have cybersecurity, why aren't states already coming together? The key thing here is states don't want to come to the bargaining table when there's an asymmetry of power, because the states who are able to defend themselves best from cyber attacks are countries like the US, China, and Russia, who know that they could retaliate with cyber attacks if it came down to it. But you level the playing field, like Armin talked about, when any state has the ability to defend itself from a cyber attack using either cyber attacks or military force. You have better mutually assured destruction, in other words, when everybody knows that they could be retaliated against in any capacity, in any shape or form. Next thing we get from their side of the house, states will have a greater incentive to hide their cyber attacks. And there's already a really strong incentive to hide your cyber attacks when you attack another country because you just don't want them to find it out. They're missing our key mechanism here, which is the fact that Russia doesn't just have to worry about being found out. They have to worry about the fact that they could be invaded if they were found out, if there could be some form of response, not even an invasion, in that worst case scenario. So they may have an incentive to hide their tracks, but the potential of the fact that there could be a severe response on the other side swings their cost-benefit analysis. Next thing I want to deal with, military retaliation can lead to an escalation of conflict. Here's where I want to clarify this debate. I think there are two types of states that we're talking about, and two types of reasons why states actually conduct cyber attacks. There are those that do it simply for intelligence purposes, and there are those that do it for the purpose of inflicting damage on another state. For those that do it to seek out information, so you want to find out more about an intelligence leak, for example, these are not the states that are going to escalate the conflict because their sole purpose of the cyber attack was to get that piece of information. It wasn't in their interest in the first place to escalate that war and to bring more damage into their own home turf. For the second type of countries, the ones that wanted to, do some damage to that other state to make it so that their military was less able to function, for example, either they would retaliate regardless because their measures are equally escalatory, they haven't proven to you why that same state wouldn't be provoked, or we now are better able to shift the cost-benefit analysis of that state, where they otherwise wouldn't have been deterred against responding in some way or form. The threat of military escalation pushes them to not conduct this attack in the first place. Recognize that the more that they push the possibility of escalation, the possibility of there being a blown-up conflict, the more that strengthens our points about deterrence. Because the more it means that the states are likely to take this into their cost-benefit analysis about whether or not they want to escalate the conflict in any way, shape, or form. At the end of the day, you need to weigh that there is a chance that this conflict could escalate. There's a chance that the wrong actor could be targeted against the certainty that if a state doesn't respond, its people could suffer. Another state retains its capacity to target that state in other ways, retains its capacity to continue doing harm to that state. We say you shouldn't gamble on the lives of people, which is exactly what the cyber terrorists want that state to do in the first place. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, realize that all of Proposition's arguments rely on the fact that these cyber attacks can be traceable. It does not work in terms of proportionality. If you attack another actor for an action, a different actor is done. It does not work for deterrence if an actor is not sure that it is going to be traced to it. Because if it knows that nobody is going to attack it, then it's not really a deterrent. If it knows that the US, for example, might think it is Hong Kong attacking instead of Russia, then Russia is not really going to be deterred. This is why accountability is so critical in this case. I have three issues in my speech. Firstly, how do we lessen the theater of war to something that is less violent? Secondly, accountability, and thirdly, on deterrence. So firstly, how do we lessen the theater of war? Because Proposition side came up here and said that now the US and China will now all agree with all these other countries because now they will have a international treaty. Well, if the only advantage of these large states is that they have such large cyber attack capability, what incentive will it have to reduce these sorts of these abilities in a treaty? They never have any analysis on that. But secondly, We think one thing that was missing from the previous speaker, no thank you, was a response to my deputy's case. We said even if it was traceable, even if it was somewhat proportionate, the fact that you can create collateral damage means that attacking or killing a small group of people with these cyber attacks will eventually, no thank you, get more people involved, more people attacking our country. What this does is increase the risk of terror, increase the risk of another attack. This is what is so harmful. This is so important because this relies on the outside of accountability and deterrence. Because on their side, countries will will now start attacking. Now countries don't really have a good reason to attack militarily because it only increases cyber warfare. But secondly, on accountability, can it be traceable beyond reasonable doubt? No, on my first speaker, we gave you 4 levels of analysis on how it cannot be traceable. In terms of anonymity, in terms of geographical discrepancy, in terms of the nature of action and the state espionage. No, thank you. And the only thing the previous speaker would like to respond to is the state actor. He said probably you can find out from what state this country is. But ignoring the rest of the analysis my first speaker gave you, which is that even if you know that if it's from a certain state, you don't know if it's one person in that state. Even if you know if it's from a certain state, you don't know if it's a proxy server from another state. That is why you cannot attribute it. But even and the other thing they'd like to say is no thank you. They said if you have espionage to find social security numbers, therefore only a state actor could have done it. So you could have traced that state agent and that you would know what that agent was something you could have done. But recognize that that state agent could have interacted with anything. All of that data, all of that virus could have any point in time would be an instance where the virus or the malware would have went to the same. When, for example, he hooked his phone to this thing, when he, for example, took a phone call and connected it to this database, there is no credible reason as you can find out at what instance you can find these sorts of things. Even though, the Russian hacking was circumstantial. The fact that you could only find, the only reason people think it is Russia is because of 2 words within that code that said tunnel bear. Anybody in the world could have written tunnel bear to frame Russia in that hacking. There's no conclusive evidence, even in the instances of hacking they are showing, as to why you cannot even trace these sorts of things. No, thank you. Before I move on.
On that point, your whole case is that it's tough to find out who it is. But when we do have a strong idea of who it is, will you use a cyber attack? And if so, why isn't military action proportional?
Okay, in the most mystical world of side proposition, when you're able to conclusively 100% find out these things, then we think it is okay to use cyber attacks and not military warfare. No, thank you. This is not a contradiction, as they would like to point out, because our point was that within cyber warfare, at least it is commensurate, because these two are the same things. In the instance when you are using military attacks, this is a direct threat on lives, and it's different from attacking like the economic angle or all those sorts of other things. We think, then they said, in some cases, we want to have a military response. And this is something they've said in the whole of proposition speech. They're going to consider, all these states are going to be considering it. But they never gave us any case as to when that the Congress will actually choose the military response. What case they never showed. They were afraid of showing what case that is. I think and they said countries declare these sort of things. Like Russia declares that they hacked the DNC. North Korea declares these things. This is just untrue. They deny repeatedly these things. Russia denies the fact that it hacked the US. North Korea denies the fact. And we said secondly, even if you want to find out, no thank you, even if it was about denying these sort of things, denial of accountability happens more on their side when countries are afraid of a military response. What else did the previous speaker say? Previous speaker said technology has advanced so much that now new technology allows us to correctly find, correctly find where the hacking comes from. In fact, we think this is untrue. The opposite has become true. Technology has advanced so much that is so much hard to exploit old malware and old websites. Because recognize that most of the technology we have are stagnant. They haven't been updated. But technology in terms of hacking, that's what has been upgraded. And that means it's harder and harder to find out where the hacking has been attributed to. You don't know the exact person, only the state. Then the previous speaker also said, well, you don't need to know, the exact person. You only need to know the state. But you're not sure what state that person is from. It's not really proportionate. Next, let me go on to my third issue, and deterrence. I already told you why deterrence only works
On that point.
when countries credibly think that the country can retaliate against them. What they do on their side is escalate the conflict without a credible deterrent. What did they say to this? They said they want to create a level playing field. So Turkey can now be on the same grounds as the United States. Well, firstly, we say, at least on our side, Turkey can invest in cybersecurity. We think that's something that's good, because that's something that won't lead to war. But secondly, giving a level playing field is not the reason to kowtow to Turkey. Just for example, because Turkey has nuclear weapons, and that's the only way it can fight with nuclear weapons, that doesn't mean we should allow Turkey to use nuclear weapons. We don't think we should kowtow to these countries if that's the only advantage they have. But is it really proportional?
On that
point, we talked about information attacks and server attacks. Not every example Team Canada uses is only on their extreme case, but their definition also includes stuff like espionage, which they have not defended. And we think on our side, in fact, it's not escalation, it's commensurate. What else did they say? We think they gave a concession that said citizens are not as afraid of cyber warfare as they are afraid of military attacks. We think then they can see that it's not the same. That citizens are much more affected by things such as military attacks, much more affected by direct attacks such as EMP bombs on their sites. Then they are afraid of stuff like cyber warfare. In terms of the magnitude of the harm, they talked about the POW drones going down, air traffic control going down. But there's no response to what first and second speaker said, as it's incomparable of an actual life versus things like stocks and all these other things. On their side then, because it's not proportional, what it only leads to is escalation. You have more and more wars, more and more bombings. And even if it's slightly possible to find the actor, we have to rule on the majority of cases. Because we have to err on the side of caution. On their side, they are risking the deaths of people. And you have to have a really high margin when you declare a war, declare a military retaliation against somebody else. We are very proud to oppose.
Without oppositions. Ladies and gentlemen, this debate boils down to three questions. First, can we determine who committed the cyber attacks? Secondly, even if we do, is this a commensurate policy to adopt? And lastly, even if it's just about the protection of states, are we able to protect the state better on their settlements? First, can we determine who committed cyber attacks? We gave you structural reasons as to why it's virtually impossible for us to find the cyber attacks. We talked about proxy servers. We talked about dark web. We talked about the fact that you hire random hackers who are anonymous and lone wolves. We talked about the fact that even if you know who the hacker is, you can't trace him to a state who hired him to be able to hack these nations. All they said was, the US is a good country with high cybersecurity. They probably can find out without telling us how they're able to do so, especially with the huge levels of anonymity that they have in cyber attacks. We asked for an example where they have evidence to show that they conclusively prove a state launched cyber attacks. They said they don't need to give us one. Which proves one thing, that they cannot determine exactly who these cyber attacks are. And it's problematic for two reasons. First, we told you it's just principally unjust to attack a state without knowing whether or not they're actually responsible for the harms done to you. That's why the Iraqi war was unjustified, because we attacked them on the premise that they have weapons of mass destruction, but we didn't actually have weapons of mass destruction. But secondly, we told you that all their arguments are contingent on this premise. Because incapacitation only works insofar as you're able to bomb the state where the source of the attacks come from. You never showed us why you're able to do so. But secondly, deterrence only works insofar as the states fear that they'll be retaliated against, but they won't if they can pin the blame on other countries like China being blamed for Russian attacks. So unless they're able to prove in this debate that they're able to conclusively determine who these actors are, then they're not able to win it already. But even in the best case, where they are able to determine who these actors are, we engage them fully. And we told you it's still principally unjustified. Which leads me to the second question. Is it commensurate to the use of military intervention? Let's assume we can determine that. And this is where they keep accusing us of making a contradiction. We never said that we'll always use cyber attacks and they'll always be able to determine. We said in the instance, the mystical instance where you're able to determine it, then you should use cyber attacks, not military intervention. It was engagement, not a contradiction. Why is it not commensurate? We said, even the worst harms they flagged under their model, which is waterways being destroyed in Israel, utilities being destroyed, these are all potential threats to lives of your citizens, but are not direct harms to their rights to life. This is incomparable to the when you use military intervention, when there's a direct harm to the citizens with collateral damage. When you bomb citizens or you bomb places and cities, it's direct harm to their lives. Meaning it's incommensurate and unjust for us to use it if it's not just war to begin with. So even if you're able to determine whether or not these states committed these actions, it's not just the right policy for us to do so. But lastly, what's better for states? Because even if this debate is only about what's best for the state that was attacked with cyber attacks, my argument showed you why their security and their stability is far worse off. First, because you elevate the threat of war to physical harms and physical risks to yourself. But secondly, in cyber warfare, you increase the potentiality for rogue hackers. And even if you're able to destabilize state-run propaganda or state-run hacking systems, now more individuals, because of the hatred towards your state for doing perceived to be unjust policy, are likely to pop up. We did hear a response from these points coming from third proposition speaker. We told you that if their only argument is that they're able to destabilize states, you harm other rogue actors and increase the potentiality for even more cyber attacks. And this is fundamentally fatal to their case because it concedes all their principles that it's right to defend yourself. We told you that military retaliation will make it worse for your ability to defend yourself, and therefore the right to self-defense no longer stands. We have proven to you why it's unjust to use their policy, and why it's ineffective and counterproductive to the security of your state. We're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Team Philippines' case today thrived in a world in which an untraceable Russian-backed man in a basement in Hong Kong DDoSes one American computer, and then the USA bombs a shopping mall in Moscow, killing thousands of people, right? We don't have to support that at all. Whereas Team Philippines' case only worked in certain instances, Team Canada's case was one of spectrum. We told you about a spectrum of threat levels, a spectrum of capabilities, a spectrum of information, and a spectrum of responses. And the reason that matters so much is that all we have to show you to win is that in some combination between all those variables, there is a case in which the military should and can be used effectively. Team Philippines has to show you why in no combination of those variables is this effective or justified, which they simply haven't done. Two questions. Firstly, is this feasible? Secondly, is this justified? On feasibility, Team Philippines hung all their analysis in this field on the idea that we don't know who or where the attacks are coming from. First response that we've given you up and down the bench is that this is empirically false in a great many cases, right? And that number of cases in which this is false is greater when the technology ferreting out those attackers is the best technology in the world, which in many cases is held by the military. We also tell you that the number of cases in which we have that information is greater when you have the cooperation of the government in which those hackers live who don't want to have a foreign military intervene against them. In cases where we do know who and where cyber attacks are going on, Team Philippines does not have anything to say. Yes, of course there will be cases where not all specificities are known, but A, Team Philippines doesn't have an alternative in those cases either, which means they don't even win on their best ground. But B, having information isn't an all or nothing set of variables. Countries don't use military lightly. It's expensive, it's difficult, it's risky. There are cost-benefit analyses. And if countries don't have enough data to justify intervention to the international community, to the taxpayers they're willing to the military hierarchy, which doesn't want to make stupid gambles, if they don't have enough info to do that, they won't do it. On feasibility, we told you that if anyone is going to retaliate, and someone must retaliate, the military, by virtue of being the military, is best positioned to be that actor. On the second question of is this justified? Interestingly enough, their case was also hung on the same idea that you never know exactly what you're doing. Once again, untrue, decreasingly untrue in our world. We told you on justification. Firstly, we don't support non-proportional escalation. They told you that we had to support bombing and World War III and genocide and atrocities. We just don't, and we just don't have to. They also told us we had to show that it's the best response. Again, something else that we don't have to do at all. We just have to show that in some cases it's a good response and a legitimate response. Once again, we think that countries will only go as far as they need to go to deter and incapacitate because countries don't want to have the World War III. Secondly, they pushed, as I said, a really unrealistic set of scenarios. They need a bunch of unlikely realities to come true to get their worst case scenario. We brought you a certainty that when awful, frightening, dangerous things happen, countries may decide to use the military to strike back. But look, they also might not, and we're okay with that. We just think they should have the option. Why do we say this is justified? When a foreign body threatens your ability as a polity to govern your people or protect their rights, you should be able to use the most effective tools in response. Their idea, which was said in their reply speech, that removing Israel's ability to give its people water to drink is not a violation of their basic human rights, is completely wrong. It definitely is. In cases where the military is most effective, we support that. And their case shifted throughout this debate. They first told you, yes, retaliate by cyber warfare, and then they told you, no, you need 100% certainty to do anything at all. In this realm, there is never 100% certainty, which means they never cross the threshold for retaliation, and no one is safe in our modern world. In Team Philippines' world, we win the debate. Thank you.